Wouldn't you know, the original episode I had recorded for today has no audio. Actually, it has half audio and then it just cuts out halfway through. I also lost a meditation I recorded, but I think that, one of those times we can say things happen for a reason. So today's episode is going to be a little bit shorter, but we're talking about the stories that keep you stuck. We know that you were born magical. We know that you are intuitive, and we know that you are brimming with everyday enchantment. Here at the Sisters Enchanted, we believe in intention, we believe in intuition, and we believe in everyday magic. Welcome in to the Expedition to Soul podcast. All right. Today, the stories that keep you stuck. I'm gonna tell you a little bit about a story in my life that kept me very stuck for a long time, and then talk to you about letting the stories go for 2024 and beyond that are keeping you feeling very stuck. So, in my life, one of the stories that I held on to for a very long time, and I have to actively work on letting go of every day, is that I don't have any help. I have no one to support me. No one thinks of me. I think of everybody else. And that's a story that keeps me very stuck because what it does is one, it pushes me into overdrive where I begin to like overachieve and over hustle and overwork and overdo for other people. So that's one of the things that it does. And that over energy keeps me very stuck in frustration, resentment, feeling tired, feeling like I'm pushing a boulder up a hill. It does that. It negatively impacts my relationships, which keeps me from having the relationships and the joy that I want, right, in my everyday life. So, these stories that we carry, and in my example, the story of not having support, over helping and not getting in return, can keep me very stuck if I'm not aware of it. And this came to a head for me in 2021. I was not feeling well that spring. And I've talked about this before. Some of y'all here have talked like bits and pieces I've shared, but I went to the doctor because I was like, so, just I hadn't been to a doctor since I had my second kid. It'd been a couple of years. And I went for just like a well visit. And I was telling my doctor that, I was so tired. And I had looked in the mirror one day and I actually thought to myself, like, I have to be dying to feel this way. There's no way I'm not dying. And that's why I went to the doctor. So she listened about my life and all the things that I do. Like I am a homeschool mom. I'm the sole income earner in my family. I own a business. I help my grandparents. My grandfather has dementia. Like I do a lot of things. And she hears all that. And instantly she's like, well, it makes sense that you're tired and you're probably burnt out, and offered me like a mental health prescription. So like a Prozac or something. I don't know. And I said, well, I actually have been on that before and this feels different. So let's get some blood work done. And then if that's fine, maybe we'll talk about that. So we get the blood work done and I get the results back, and my ferritin and my iron were both a 3. So if anybody is a nurse or, knows blood, your ferritin should be way higher than a 3. 3 is like critically alarming. It's not kind of alarming. It is critically alarming. For reference, my husband, who obviously does not menstruate because, he's a dude, but that impacts blood loss. His is a 255. And, I think like pretty standard for a menstruating person of my age is like in the 70s or something like that. So mine was a 3. My hemoglobin was in the tank. My blood cell sizes were way too small. So right away, I go to a hematologist who's, an oncologist too, to make sure I don't have cancer and all this, whatever. So as you can imagine, the story of me not getting any help, support, whatever, came like raging through at this period in time, because all I could think was, I have been telling people how tired I am and how exhausted I am for like 2 years. And I'm still having to catch everybody's balls. Like everybody's still fumbling the plays in my life, and I'm having to step in and, um, you know, like no one heard me this whole time. And now it took me literally having a condition for people to be like, oh, I guess Sarah was right. Right. And so this is a story that I'm telling myself, and I'm relaying this story to you because you might have a story in your life, and it could be around money, it could be around childhood, things that happened in your life that you really hold on to and that you bring up again in your adulthood. These stories, though, they keep us very stuck. And here's the thing about these stories and what makes it so hard to release them. One, because they're true stories. I mean, it is true that people, when I said, I need help, I'm exhausted, and like there was a lack of hand raising to help me. That is true. And then two, when we just release the stories and release attachment to them, I think we have an internal underlying fear that it then makes the story not valid or less important. So if I just say, wow, I was really sick and was asking for help and wasn't getting it, if I just decide to not hold on to that story, does it then mean that my health is not important? Does it then mean that it was okay that I asked for help and didn't get it? And then our minds play these tricks on us where it's like, well, now I have to hold on to the story because then if I let it go, it makes that not important. And then what was all that suffering worth? What was it all for? The same if you have a story about, childhood wounding and these things that maybe the way your parents treated you or things people said to you or not having money or having like growing up broke and then you clawed your way out of that or maybe you didn't and so you feel like you can't get out of it because the way you broke up the way you up these stories if you then say well I'm going to release attachment to that story. I'm not going to let it have power over me anymore. It's a thing that happened and I'm moving past it. Then does it make all of that not important? Does it forgive the people in your life? And then I think that we so badly want to be validated and we want to be heard and we want to be affirmed that we hold on to the stories that keep us stuck. So these stories then they stick in your energy and your internal energy, your energy centers, and the energy that radiates out of you with these kinds of stories swirling around in there. It makes it nearly impossible. And this is very opinion based. Obviously, this is not like science research. This is my opinion that it can be very impossible then to change the way your life is or change the way you receive things in your life or the way you interact with people because these stories are just swirling around in your energy and coming up at every single turn. So this for me, my story that I'm sharing with you as my personal, this is what the most recent, of course, I've got tons of these in my life. We're all human. I've got so many I could share. But as the most recent relevant one, at some point I had to let go of this attachment to, yes, see what I did for everybody. And even though I was so sick and lucky, I was so lucky I did not faint or pass out while driving and end up in the hospital. And I'm not exaggerating when I tell you I looked in the mirror and thought I had to be dying. Like I had to have cancer and was dying. And I needed to get to a doctor. And I can't even explain the way I felt because it wasn't like sick. It was just and I had 2 babies. My youngest would have only been like 3 or 4 years old at this time, and so I was still pretty familiar with that, like, newborn exhaustion, and this was a whole other level of just, like, I can't function. My body wants to fall over and not function. Anyway, and so when I hold on to that story and what releasing people from that and saying, "You know what? Actually, they aren't me, and they really didn't know what I was going through. And actually, I did not help the situation by continuing to push on and not delegate and not have assertive communication and boundaries and take ownership of my own life." So, detaching from these stories that are really keeping you stuck, it's about taking ownership of your own life and understanding that you have to validate your own self. You have to be your own best friend. You have to affirm your own experience. And looking for it externally is really like, it can feel good and it can feel really nice to have somebody in your life validate you and say, "Yes, I see this." And at the end of the day, though, that story is going to come back up again. And the people in your life are not going to want to keep validating you, which is also valid. Like there's people in your life that you don't want to keep validating. They always bring up the same thing. And you're like, I already heard about it. I already told you, like I'm sorry that happened. Let's move past it. Yet we want other people to do that for us. And so validating your own self. And so I can say, yes, that was a really hard time. And I had a lot of resentment towards people. And I did nothing to help the situation. And what did I learn about that so that in the future it doesn't happen again? And now, because I still struggle with this same issue, even this is now, what's that was 2021. So it'll be 3 years this April. And it's still like an unsolved mystery for me. I now have low ferritin without anemia, which is, pretty much, I don't know. My hematologist is like, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. um, and though now I know when my body starts to feel like I can feel it instantly, and I'll go get my blood work done. And sure enough, it'll be in the like toilet again. And so I have learned though boundaries. I've learned delegation skills. I've learned assertive communication. I've learned what is my problem and what is not my problem. I've learned to release perfection in some areas of my life. And I've learned to communicate my needs and my desires and how I'm feeling in a more clear, compassionate way to get the support that I need. So letting go of the story that I don't get help is what allowed me to actually serve myself and get what I needed. And if I didn't let go of that story that was keeping me stuck, I would not have crossed the bridge to improve that area of my life. So if there's some place in your life, maybe it's a spouse and you feel like they just aren't hearing you or they're not holding up their end of the bargain, or maybe it's with money and you feel like that every time you get a dollar, you get a bill for $1.25. And the fact of the matter is, I think, is the stories we tell ourselves about those situations. It's those stories that keep us stuck in the behavior that is perpetuating the situation. And then what do? We have to release those stories so that we can then shift our energy, grow, and receive the thing that we are looking for in our life. Now, another way that you can do this is if you know the 7 energy centers. So we teach these in our holistic witchery program. You'll also hear about them if you register for our free Heal Like a Witch podcast series. You can take the story and kind of run it through your energy stories centers and see how it might be impacting you. So my story of lack of support, your root energy center, that is the world around you. It's your financial situation, your career, your childhood stories. I can say, I feel a lack of support, like no one's helping me. And then I can think about how that impacts that area of my life. And then I can look at my sacral energy center, which is your passion, your desire. It's like sex, money, power. If you're into astrology, it's basically like the eighth house of your of your energy in some ways. In some ways, it's not a complete comparison, but and a little bit overlap there. And then I can say, well, how does this feeling like I'm not being supported impact that area, And then I can do my confidence center, my solar plexus, and how does not feeling supported impact that? And then my heart, how does that impact my ability to unconditionally love other people and myself? And then my throat, my third eye, and my crown, etc. So if there's a story in your life that just keeps coming up, and this is a little bit like shadow work too, or it is shadow work, really. If there's something in your life that just keeps coming up, you can even run it through your energy centers and see how it's actually playing out and keeping you stuck. And again, I think the reason we hold on to stories so tight, because what does it mean about us and the situation if we let it go? What does it mean, if you forgive somebody in your life who did not treat you well? Does it mean then that it was okay that they treated you well? Does it mean that it's not, a valid experience anymore? And I don't think that's the case, but I think that's what our mind tells us, that if you just say, hey, that's in the past, or hey, I learned, hey, I grew, hey, that person learned and grew, and they're not that person anymore. I think the reason we hold on to stories is because we're used to them. That's like who we are. We've defined ourselves by the story. I know for me, I've always defined myself as a person who can hold a lot, do a lot. You know, um, I remember in high school, I had a terrible thing happen in my life, and I was like kept getting sent to the guidance counselor for it. And I remember actually saying to the guidance counselor one day, I was like, I think 15, and I said, well, better me than somebody else, because I can handle it, and I know somebody else wouldn't be able to. And how deep is that story in my life that I've been telling myself that since I was 15? So I've made it part of my identity, and to then shift my identity as a grown woman and say, actually, everybody can handle things as well as I can. Everybody. It's like literally available to everybody if they want to flex that muscle, and if they want to grow that in their life. Maybe they don't want to, and that's okay that they don't want to. Maybe they do, maybe they won't, don't. I don't know. That's not up to me. But I had to change my identity and say, well, maybe that's not just who I am. Maybe that was just a way I chose to be. And I don't like, how is it actually impacting me to be that way? And so we wrap our identity around these stories, and then we really hold on to them because, again, what does it make the incident or whatever happened to, or the story or the situation or the experience, the circumstance, does it make it not valid, not important if you let go of it? And I think that we all hold on to many things in our lives for that reason. Like, it just becomes part of who we are and the story we tell in our lives. And it's terrifying to let that go. Anyway, all right. Well, maybe that's not exactly what I talked about in my first recording of this podcast, but I think it is a message. I was thinking about this recently, and this story, how I have to really actively let it go over and over again in my life. And I was just thinking about that. And then I realized my original podcast did not record all the way. So I think there you go. There's an example for me of a story that has kept me very stuck over and over again. And I have to really be mindful of it and let go. And in making those changes, though, my marriage is better, my relationships are better. Like, I just wake up happier. I'm the calmest I've ever been. I also use our 5I framework, which is a self-coaching tool. And I use that to help me support me in letting go of my stories also. So if you want information on that, check out our holistic witchery program. That's really where you're going to learn about that, and you're going to learn to use it. We've had so many great successes in our community of people who've been using it for less than 2 months and have completely flipped something 180 in their life, that was a certain way and is now different, or the way they would have managed something or reacted was different. Saying yes. We had one member who would never just say yes to this trip to Hawaii, I think it is. And then after all these years is like, yes, I'm going, because they were able to shift the way that their energy and the way that they think and react using that 5I method. So check that out. It's a perfect tool for this kind of thing as well. All right. Well, thank you for hanging with me on today's podcast episode. Again, if you're interested in learning more about that 5I framework, which is one of the tools that I use, I use it every single day, multiple times a day, to help me move through mind ninja things that are coming up, mind gremlins, and energy stories. And so I can just reorient and get where I'm going to go in life. Check out Holistic Witchery for more on that. And thank you for hanging out with me on today's podcast episode. Until next time, I hope that you have an enchanted rest of your day ahead. If you liked this episode of the Expedition to Soul podcast, please rate, review, subscribe. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, it will really help us spread everyday magic, intention, and intuition to the masses, and helps us so much as a small business. Be sure to hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. There are new episodes every Tuesday. And as always, thank you so much for listening and being part of the community here at the Sisters Enchanted. And we'll see you in the next episode.